Text, Realibility's Film Festival panel discussion, Is Hollywood Afraid of Disability? October 22, 2022. A group on stage with ASL interpreters.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you to the audience for coming out this afternoon with us to have this really important and great conversation. My name is Andrea Jennings, and I'm the moderator. I'm a disability inclusion strategist. I am here as your moderator. I want to introduce some great, interesting panelists. First, I want to tell you a little bit of background about myself. I'm a disability inclusion strategist, as I said, founder of Shifting Creative Paradigms. I am the Accessibility and Disability Commissioner, chair for City of Pasadena, the Accessibility and Disability Strategist for C Talent, and founder and co-founder of Ramped Recording Artists and Music Professionals with Disabilities. I want to also include a self-description, and I want to ask the panelists if they so choose to provide one for themselves. So first of all, I'm a Black woman who prefers the pronouns she, her, hers, ea. I have my hair styled in a black bob, shoulder length. I'm wearing a black suit with a blue sweater.
Captions appear on screen.
I wanted to introduce you now to our awesome panelists. This panel will take a look at what may be holding Hollywood back from advancing disability, diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. People have assumptions, stereotypes, and fears about disability. Given the unique role that Hollywood plays in either perpetuating or dispelling these notions, why haven't we come further in authentically addressing disability on the big screen? Is Hollywood afraid of disability? We encourage you to ask questions toward the end of the session. And again, I thank you all for being here, and I'm excited to facilitate this conversation. I want to start with Kurt. Kurt has written and developed projects with producers, showrunners, and directors, acquired film and TV rights to best-selling books, and is featured. The first case is currently on the blacklist. He is well known for his on-screen reoccurring appearances in Son of Anarchy, Quarry, Tell Me a Story, SEAL Team, The Village, NCISLA, and series regular on Another Life. Additionally, he has produced 25 commercial projects for GMC, Chevy, Marmol, BMW, plus other brands, and shot 65 plus episodes of TV in 9 years, 15 plus films, and recently sold a project to Sony. Hey, Kurt, that's pretty cool. Kurt Yeager is a producer, writer, and performer with a disability. Kurt is the Ruderman Foundation board member. He's SAG-AFTRA performer. He's with a disability committee. He's a disability committee member with SAG-AFTRA performers. Writers Guild of America, Writers with Disabilities member, and a Producer Guild Diversity Workshop member. Producer of the award-winning music video, Rudimental Video, Waiting All Night, 231 million views. Wow. We also have Rod Carrillo Ludgren. If I messed up your name, I'm sorry, is currently Director of International Programming and Development for AMC Networks, overseeing original development and co-producers for AMC, AMC Plus, Sundance Now, and BBC America. Before joining AMC, Rod worked at Freeform, Latin World Entertainment, NBC Universal International Studios, and Universal Cable Productions. He received his master's from Newcastle University Business School in the UK and his bachelor from Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. Nasreen Al-Kahib. Nasreen is an Emmy award-winning cinematographer whose work illuminates historically excluded voices, utilizing I can't even talk today, utilizing her ability to motivate audiences is a direct result of approaching stories through multiple identities, including being a person with multiple disabilities. Her work has been featured by VP Kamala Harris. It would help if I put on my glasses, right?
Puts on glasses.
That would help. Oprah, NASA, Tribeca Film Festival, the Women's March, the United Nations, FX Network, and Apple Plus. And a 22 Ford Foundation's Disability Futures Fellow, a Visions Mentee of the American Society of Cinematographers, and a Fellow of Sundance Accessible Futures Intensive. Forbes described her as breaking barriers. Wow, Nasreen. Our last panelist is Ryan. Ryan, help me out. Demoterin, we talked about this, is the director of integrated planning and multicultural at Disney Studios content. In partnership with filmmakers and teams across Disney, he works to ensure representation, authenticity, and intentionality throughout support for studio titles, helping upcoming films like Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, and The Little Mermaid. He's also part of Disney's Creative Inclusion Council. Prior to this, Ryan helped to build the studio integrated planning team and oversaw planning for films including Frozen, Manoa, Coco, Soul, and Encanto. Born and raised in New Jersey, Ryan graduated from Northwestern University before moving to LA and joining Disney in 2011. Please welcome our esteemed panelists. Thank you. So let's just dive deeply into this discussion. Um, First of all, I just want to, thank you guys for being brave to talk about this. I'm a disability inclusion strategist, so I think this is a wonderful conversation. I work in government, I work in corporate, and one of the things that I try to get people to understand is that disability, we're not looking for charity. We're professionals. As we discussed today, you're all esteemed professionals, um, highly rated in your industries. And so some of the things I tell people is disability is part of inclusion. We're often left out. One of the things I don't understand is when people leave us out of comprehensive studies. How do you know that you have the right talent? How do you know you have the best talent if you have left out 1/4 of America's population, right? So I'm getting a lot of feedback from the business and the corporate world and the government world. They're understanding the value of people with disabilities. So when I get to Hollywood, though, there's still this understanding of the stereotypes. Why do you think that Hollywood isn't catching on the way corporations are? Why do you think they're not really understanding people with disabilities, the values? I'm going to go ahead and give that to Kurt.
I think it basically breaks down to the lack of experience and the lack of people with disabilities in executive positions in those corporations. If you don't have the representation, then you don't have that representation inside of the closed doors and the rooms to have a spoken voice. So I think you have to focus on, in that particular question, focusing on getting employment up through the executive class of the corporations of film and television production companies and the studios and the networks.
Yeah, I think so. And I'd like to ask Nasreen that question as well.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. Basically, from a business standpoint, people with disabilities, we are really trying to make people understand that we are not a charity case. We're opinion leaders. And some of the corporate world and even government, they're kind of understanding that. They're giving us a little bit more respect. Hollywood is a little bit slow to understand that. So what is your feelings? Why do you think that is?
I think it's not just Hollywood, but definitely Hollywood in terms of our representation and how we are perceived in television, in film. Um, we're just now being B characters, side characters, and just now being cast authentically, like in the last few years. Um, it would be great to actually see lead characters as disabled. It would be great to have uh, more content about things that aren't about our disability. And I think once Hollywood starts to understand that there's more to us than just the disability, I think the fear is real. That's why I think the stigma is real, and I think corporations are starting to see the money and chase the money. And I don't know that Hollywood is there yet or ready for us yet, even though we are.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I would love to also ask the other panelists as well. What do you think is the problem? What do you think is the reason? So, Rod, would you love to answer that?
Yeah, I will. I will do my best here. I think it. You were talking about how 1/4 of adult Americans are disabled, right?
Right.
before doing this panel, I decided to do a little bit of a deep dive into some of the statistics
Mhm.
and looking at the fact that I think it's 3% of characters on TV are disabled, but yet still of those 3%, only 95% they're able-bodied actors. So 5% are disabled actors playing a disabled character. If you don't have that level of authenticity in and of itself, you're already at a huge disservice. Because I was very fortunate to work on a show when I worked at Freeform called Everything's Gonna Be Okay. And for those who are unfamiliar, it essentially, at its core, was a very heartfelt comedy about a family just trying to figure out their way in the world after the death of their father very unexpectedly. And one of the lead characters was autistic, and she was played by an actress who was also on the autism spectrum. And she brought a huge layer of her own lived experiences to that character and the series as a whole. And just quick addition to that, and spoiler alert for anybody who has not seen it, the show's creator, writer, star, Josh Thomas, during the second season, also found out he was on the autism spectrum and made the decision to incorporate that into his character's journey and arc over the second season. And I think the fact that Disney actually allowed the story to even be told, firstly, but then consulted with numerous organizations and individuals, in addition to letting these actors bring their lived experiences to the story, I have not seen many other shows, probably if any shows, that are that level of authentic.
Yeah, thank you for that. Ryan, I'd love to hear what you have to add to this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd have to echo a lot of what Kurt said in that it's really about the people making decisions behind the scenes and then also filmmakers. I think the more voices in the room of folks with disabilities and the more those folks feel the opportunity to be their authentic selves in those rooms and bring their whole selves to the conversations, the more opportunity there will be to bring this work to the forefront. And I think that feels like it's not specific to disabilities. It's kind of the conversation that happens around a lot of underrepresented groups. Is so much of the progress that needs to happen is the folks who are making decisions, the folks who are making content. I think the only way we're going to see true progress in the disability space is seeing that same progress behind the scenes.
I love what you're saying, Ryan. Thank you for that. That brings me to another question. Your point in bringing your whole self to the room. Sometimes we're afraid to. We're not just Hollywood is afraid of disability, but sometimes we have our own internalized ableism. We're afraid for good reason. We're afraid to be discriminated against. So that brings me to my next question, where I want to ask everyone about the inclusion writer. And so for those, for those who don't understand what an inclusion writer is, it's an addendum to a contract when we are performing that can be used for different things. As a speaker, sometimes I will put in my writer, I don't want to be the only Black person. I don't want to be the only disabled person here, especially if it's a bigger, larger panel. I don't want to be the only person of color or the only member of an underrepresented group. But what do you guys? What do the panelists feel about inclusion writers? Do you think it's helpful? What would you like to be seen more in that aspect? Because in order for it to work, remember, like Ryan said, we have to be. We can't be afraid to bring our whole self, to the table. So I'm gonna start out with Nasreen.
Bringing your whole self to the project, it definitely takes a level of, fearlessness to break down barriers that exist. That there are groups of people that think about disability as something that they should maybe not pay attention to because it's not happening to them, or they're not aware that it's actually happening in their family or to their friends, or that it somehow makes them less or less valuable, or makes their team members less valuable. I think our culture has a lot to do with defining what disability is. And I think, everyone here, me included, has a responsibility to redefine what that word is so that people can be less afraid of it. It's part of life. It is a natural thing. It is a wholesome, beautiful thing. And I think once people start to redefine that in their minds. You know, whatever they were taught, whatever misconceptions were taught to them through parents or community, that needs to be redefined in order for us to think about it and approach it with less fear.
I love that. And I'll tell you guys a quick story as a storyteller. So, two things. When I first became disabled, I heard the term differently abled. I thought it was so cute and I started using it everywhere until I learned, because I wasn't born with a disability. I acquired my disability, that I learned that it could, from some disability groups, that it could be perceived as harmful. It could lend to the stereotypes and the tropes that we try now to break down those barriers. So another thing, that before I would go speaking projects, I would show a sizzle reel. And in the sizzle reel, I at that point in time, I said the word "I suffer from." So here I am, the disability, expert, so to speak, and I said, a very harmful word. So it's true. Like, we have to. This is not to place the blame on us at all. First, let me explain that. But it's also to say that we have to remember that we were part of a world that we were taught to be afraid. And so we have to be okay with, like Ryan said, bringing our whole self. But I'd love to, and I find that sometimes I have to admit to people that I've made those mistakes too. But once I learn that it's harmful, I stop. And so I'd love to give that question to Rod, that we were just talking about inclusion writers and making sure that you get the accommodations that you need. But before you can do that, you have to admit that you need them.
And that, I think, is the big hurdle. Kind of what you were also talking about, Nazreen, and I think earlier, this is larger than just the industry. It is systemic, it's institutional,
Yes.
It's all over the world for every minority group. And I know for myself, if it wasn't for having worked on that show, Everything's Gonna Be Okay, I would not have myself also found out that I am on the autism spectrum. And it is this kind of coming out process again as well. I am also LGBTQ+. And to be fully honest with you, the trauma that you go through, the fear, the anxiety that you live with, because you don't know how people are going to perceive you. And you do know the world that you live in has not been designed by or for you to benefit from it. It's been made for a specific group to benefit from. So there is this inherent fear, honestly, when you have to almost self-identify. But I also know that I have the privilege that as long as I don't tell you that I am on the autism spectrum, or I don't self-identify as LGBTQ+, you look at me and think, he's a white guy. So I have to live with those privileges, but then also realize that if we are not open and upfront about these other parts of our identity, that visibility is so key. Because just to even be seen is half of the battle, I think, personally. Because I know that there are a lot of other people in this industry who are afraid to self-identify, who are also neurodivergent, who are disabled, everything. But they don't think that they will be given the same opportunities if they self-identify. They will somehow be held back in their careers. And I think that fear is very real.
Yeah. So when I hear you say is that if society would create a safe space for people to talk about it, it would be easier, because the onus is not just on us. So
I'm going to quickly add on to that. I feel like that is also a part of the problem,
Yeah.
and that the onus is always placed back on us
Yeah.
and solely on us. And I think there's a lot of times where I've been asked to educate someone. Well, what does that mean? Like, what are your quote unquote deficits, or what areas of need do you specifically need? And if you haven't done even just a little bit of educating and bring something to the table, it's very off-putting, because then I have to educate you and meet you where you are. Please just do a little bit of work. Come meet me a little bit closer to where I am, and I am more than happy to engage and educate, and actually probably more so than I would otherwise.
yeah, I totally get that. When people go to a different country and they want to fit in with the culture, they research it. And so why is it so different with disability culture? I'd love to thank you for that. Thank you so much. And I'd love to ask the question about, being authentic and about inclusion writers to Ryan.
I mean, I can't speak about inclusion writers specifically because I don't work on the content side of things, but I can say, you know, while the problem is systemic in terms of the environments where folks don't feel comfortable, and I call caveat, I'm speaking from a place of privilege here. I think it is incumbent on everyone, whether they're a leader or they're just leading a discussion or a conversation, to create the environment where you are inviting people to ask for what they need or you are asking what they need versus the culture where I think a lot of folks are right now, where everyone's expected, well, if you need an accommodation, you need to ask for it. You need to expect to ask for it in advance. And so I think that that idea of bringing your whole self, it's it's on it's a systemic problem, but it's on every single room, every single discussion, for the people who are in control of that room to help create that environment where people feel like they can ask for what they need, or you are asking folks what they do need going into it, regardless of whether folks are coming to the table with a disability, because there are other accommodations that aren't necessarily rooted in disability that folks might need and might feel uncomfortable asking for. So I think also pulling it away from just being specific, oh, well, if you have a disability, you need to make sure you ask about this, and making it more of a, hey, how do we foster a more open, honest environment where we're inviting people to ask for what they need and bring their whole self, the better.
I love what you're saying. And even though you're saying that you don't have a lot of experience in inclusion writers, I mean, you hit the nail right, right there, because it's like you're saying the society needs to make sure that, for instance, captions are being used by people, but it was, originally made for a different purpose. But we all need captions. So more of a universal design concept where, when you really think about it, more than one person can utilize some of the accommodations. Kurt, I'd love to ask you about the inclusion writer and just coming out to be your full self when it pertains to disability or any underrepresented group.
As an actor, your full self includes the negative parts. And when you bring those parts, you realize that completes who you are. If I played like a bad character and I don't include the good parts, it's also limiting. So I think if you lead with your disability with confidence, all of a sudden people want a part of that confidence. They want to hear your story. They want to hear why you have the experiences you have. And once you do that, they'll start asking those questions from a colleague perspective. So if you lead with that confidence, I really truly believe that they'll start asking you questions on a creative, complementary level. From an inclusion writer perspective, I think that it's important that you see where the inclusion writer perspectives are in order to see your own flaws, your own biases, to recognize maybe where there might be some problems, but there's always multiplicities of solutions. So if I was going to write a project, which I do, and then I really want to cast somebody who's an amputee and I can't play that character for whatever reason, if I can't find that character to play that character, then I go, okay, then two other of my characters that weren't disabled are now going to be disabled without writing a single different word. And then that other character who's not an amputee is going to learn everything about the world. So not only am I educating in the process, but then at the same time with the other characters, I'm creating opportunities for people with disabilities in roles that wouldn't normally trickle down from the executive level through the directorial level, through the showrunner level, through the writer level, and then down to casting, then to your agent, and then to you. So I think it's really important that you lead with who you really are, and then people will respect that.
I love that, and I agree.
And it's not easy.
Yeah.
Right? Like I've led and people have smacked me and batted me and said, no, that's not good. But then I've been very fortunate. So she mentioned I did Sons of Anarchy. Like I tried to get with the casting director, tried to get with the casting associate, other producers. I just could not get on that show for the life of me. And then I was at an event where Kurt Sutter, the showrunner, was at. And I said, this is my moment. I can say something to him, but I have to speak to him from his perspective. So I walked up to him and said, hey, Kurt, you have like one of the best shows on TV. I love it. And he's like, thank you very much. And I said, you captured the Northern California Motorcycle Club so well, down to like Jax, the lead character, wearing white kicks. Oh, I love that. He's like, thank you. I go, you're just missing one thing. And he goes, what? And I go, every single club has a guy go down and rips his leg off. And he goes, you could see it like bubbling in his mind. He's like, oh shit, that's real. He's telling the truth. And then I gave him my card and I said, I'm not going to tell you how good of an actor I am, but I can ride motorcycles better than all your actors. Have a good day. And so because of that, he was like, wait a minute, there's something true here. And Hollywood, if anything breaks through, it's truth. If you really get down to it. So if you come with your truth and your experiences, you'll break through.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for that story. And Rod was talking about systemic change, and I agree. I do not feel that we should put band-aids over things and talk about things that we're really, that's going to just cover the surface level. And so we have a systemic problem here. And so we need to do major things. And even though I'm a DEI professional, I still believe that I have to break barriers so that we dive deeply into subjects. So my next question is, we've come a long way with DEI efforts, but has disability come as far as other marginalized groups? And I see I see Rod shaking his head now, so I'm gonna go ahead and start with him.
It definitely hasn't. It
Mhm.
really hasn't. And again, to go to statistics, the DGA does not track the number of disabled directors currently, but they want to in the future. However, the WGA does. And I don't know if anybody knows the sheer number of active members in the WGA who are disabled. Does anybody want to take a guess?
I think it's around 12.
Probably.
I
Yeah.
think it's
It's
around 12.
0.7%
Yeah.
of all of their active members, which is thousands. That is, when you think about 26% of adults being disabled and only 0.7% of writers who could write these stories, that is such a disproportionate representation. So that alone, there's obviously, as you were talking about, you need to start hiring more people with disabilities in every single level of this industry, on productions, in the writers' rooms as assistants, even at the executive levels, and assistants and interns at the studios. That's where it needs to start, really.
Yeah, to follow up, just the DGA, I think it's 3 or 4 directors. Ben Lewin,
I believe it.
Brandon Saunier, I'm trying to think of my Corey, help me out. What's her beautiful name? Gold, Jenny Gold. Jeez, I needed
Yeah.
Corey's help right there. You see that? And see, this is the thing. We all know each other, right?
Right.
Like I've seen you. We go to the same events. But yeah, I think there's 3 or 4 DGA directors.
Yeah.
And then she directed me in an episode of a show, and now I'm looking at the camera going, thank you very much for directing me in that episode, but I can't remember your name. That's bad.
No, thank you for that. And I mean, multicultural communities are a way of the future, and you're right. I mean, we're not added to the metrics. We're not added to comprehensive studies, and so that's something that needs to definitely change. Um, And I'd love to. Something that's interesting to me. A long time ago, when Hollywood was in the beginning stages, directors, and sometimes even now, they're on wills. Sometimes in order to get that shot, they used accommodations. So I think it's really interesting that when we ask people for accommodations, they're like, stumped. Also, I wanted to say, when people ask for accommodations for an actress when she can't jump off of a building, they get her a stunt woman, right? So, so Hollywood is like the most, in the industry that really provides all these accommodations, like for everyone else. So I just think that's different. Why is disability a taboo topic? I'll ask Nesreen.
Again, yeah, the fear is there. Taboos generally come about because of a misunderstanding. someone that doesn't have enough knowledge to understand what the subject is, what it means to that other person or that group of people. And the fear really makes it impossible for people to see themselves reflected in disability. I think 1 in 4 is a conservative number. I think it's a lot bigger than that. I think we take up a much larger footprint. And even that statement is ableist. I have to figure out another way of saying that.
A what print?
A shoe print, a wheel print.
It's all good.
So if someone has a better way of saying it, please come find me. I think we already take up a lot of space. But there's just this pretending that happens that we're not there. And we are. We're in every facet of everyone's day, all day long. We're your sisters, we're your grandparents, we're your teachers. We are more than 1 in 4.
Yeah.
And if we are more than 1 in 4, even if we're just the numbers 1 in 4, that means there should be 1 out of 4 stories written by us, starring us, directed by us. And that number's failing.
Yeah.
It's not there.
Would anybody like to add to what Noreen's saying about why is disability a taboo topic?
I mean, I think a big part of it is it's a lack of understanding the perspective. Like if you consider, if my hand is covering my eye at this close, what's my perspective? Someone who can see far is going to say, oh, that's limited. And I'm like, but can you not see the details of your own hand? So I think that the lack of perspective on people's perspectives and the value of it, it's, homogeny, right? It's like, oh, we're all going this way. So if it's not this way, then it's not valuable. If you see like why, one Armageddon movie comes out and now there's 40 different asteroid movies, it's because they're just trying to copy the thing that worked once. Right. And so what we have to do is keep proving that this works and our perspectives work. So I think that's a big part of it, is the lack of understanding. And if you think about it from their perspective, if they're in a pure ableist position, then maybe it's all candy canes, sugar cones, and this I don't know, mauve kind of world that's just bland.
Right.
And I want to see depth. I want to see characters. I want to see interesting aspects. I want to see a character with a disability that's not written for their disability to be played as, and then something changes inside of it just because that actor's presence is there.
Yeah.
For no other reason, and changing not one word. Yeah. I have a project that I'm working on, and I'm writing this one character, and I can't say too much about it, but this character is a mayor of a town, and I'm writing this character as a he. Now, I will cast a female in that role, but I won't change a single word at all, period, just because I want to see that played that way. So I'm leaning into my own biases and then going at the very end, I'm not going to do that. Instead of pretending that I don't have biases. You know what I mean? So I think if people without disabilities go, I don't know anything about this world, let me find someone to add to it and figure it out because I don't know. And then we can give some honesty. I think if we give grace, then I think that's where that learning process comes in.
Yeah,
where you go, let's figure it out.
I love that. You can teach a class on that. That's awesome. Ryan, I saw that you raised your hand. Did you want to add to what Kurt was saying?
I was just going to add, I know Nasreen touched on fear, and I think there's also fear from folks who are not part of the disability community that they don't know how to talk about it. They don't know the right words to use. They don't know what they can and they cannot say. And so I think there's an educational component that's also necessary. Look, we talk about the change that's necessary in the people who are making decisions, the people who are making content, et cetera. We know those changes are not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a long piece of work to make those changes in the industry. And so in the meantime, how do we make sure all the folks who are making content right now are better educated, that they have they have that vocabulary, that they are trained to ask questions that they maybe are not asking before, that they're kind of interrogating their own biases. And so how are we creating systems to educate folks as well in the interim? And I know it's tough because it often feels then that the onus is put on folks from the disability community to educate others, but how do we take it off of folks in the disability community then? How do we just make education a core part of the filmmaking process, that, you know, whether you're telling a story about someone with a disability or someone from an underrepresented community you're not a part of, or someone who's living in, I don't know, ancient Egypt, or, you know, turn of the century London. You know,
Yeah.
I don't have the knowledge of those time periods. If you were going to tell a story about that time period, I guarantee most people are going to do research. They're going to talk to historians. They're going to bring other perspectives. And how do we train folks to do the same thing when it comes to folks who are coming from backgrounds and disabilities that they're not familiar with, to be able to make more progress in front of the camera, while we're still trying to make that progress behind the camera.
I love that. And that's even across industries. I mean, educate people, maybe add this in film school, you know, add this in colleges and universities, and maybe even let's start early, like in, you know, grade school. I love that. Ryan, since we're talking to you, I wanted to understand from you, like what successes and failures has the film industry had in bringing disability to the forefront of film, kind of like what we were just talking about.
I mean, from a success perspective, I'm going to toot Disney's horn a little bit, but I do, you know, I look at deaf representation from the Walt Disney Company.
Okay.
You know, in the last year and a half, two superheroes, Lauren Ridloff's character Makari in Eternals, and Alakwa Cox's character Maya Lopez in Hawkeye. You've got a deaf character playing a prominent role in Only Murders in the Building. And I think with that, that's brought a greater cognizance of the deaf community. Obviously, there's broader things in the industry with Coda winning Best Picture last year. And I've seen people talking about ASL, talking about captioning in ways that I haven't seen them talking about before, and asking those questions just from a few examples that have kind of pushed people to kind of interrogate a bit further.
Yeah.
Failures, I mean, I think I'm not going to call out anybody, but I think you still see examples in the industry of characters with disabilities who might be written by someone without a disability, played by someone without a disability, and maybe
Right.
not in consultation with someone with a disability,
Yeah.
where they're bringing biases or bringing kind of, you know, they're rehashing narratives that we've seen before, which is a lot of, you know, disability is something you have to overcome. This is a story about a non-disabled actor playing a character with a disability who has to overcome something in this story.
Awesome.
And I think there's still work to do there.
No, thank you. And you know, I just want to remind everybody, and I should have done this in the beginning, but all of the panelists, their opinions are their own, and so we're representing ourselves here. And just, I want to give that question to Nasreen, as far as like successes and failures in the industry when it comes to disability, and for the film industry specifically. And to actually to bringing disability to the forefront of film is specifically the question.
You know, the effort to redefine that word disability, what is it? You know, who gets to be disabled? Who gets to tell those stories? We Are Lady Parts was something, was a Peacock production that I think did a really great job of bringing disability to the forefront. And I'm not sure that it was branded that way, but it is. And it was intersectional to boot. Also, another ableist. I need another word. Um, failing up here. Sorry. Apologies. But the fact that this was extremely popular show that was intersectional and that was disabled led was really exciting to me, especially because I got to see so other, you know, many other identities that I have represented in a non-traditional way that wasn't about like a scary terrorist. That was great. And there are other shows and films like that. Plan B is one of them. I believe that's an Apple Plus show. But those are successful because they take characters who are going through the worst night of their life, or they're falling in love, um, and they're having all the same problems that all of us do. They're also disabled. The story is not about that.
Yeah.
I think the more that we see those types of stories pushed to the forefront, um, and the more that we kind of infiltrate pop media without them knowing, the more that I think the more that we're actually in the rooms writing the stories, um, and represented authentically, the more it will be copied and replicated at other studios. And so I'm excited for more content like Plan B, like We Are Lady Parts.
I love that answer. We are at our time. We're getting close to it, and I want to leave a little bit of room just maybe for a couple of questions. I want to just do a quick round robin and ask each panelist to leave us with final thoughts and call to actions for Hollywood when it comes to authentic inclusion. So I want to start out with Kurt.
All right. I think the call to arms for us is to support each other. I'm an amputee, and I'm going to support everybody else: wheelchair user, deaf, blind, hard of seeing, hard of hearing, etc. If we unite, I think that we'll be a more unified voice and be able to bring more numbers and eyeballs to projects and productions. So we have to unite that way, as other groups have, in order to gain a dollar value perspective from Hollywood. Otherwise, like, lead with your experiences, like I was talking about. Once I leaned into everything, and other people, like, I know I forced them to, like, lean into their societal flaws. That's the name of it, right? Like, that's how they perceive us. Once I did that with my stuff, they were like, oh, wait a minute. He's confident. He's cocky. He's these things. I want to be a part of it. Like, right? Like, you're not, it's like, once you do that, they're like, what do you have that I don't? And I say, roughage. I went through it. So what you have to offer me is nothing. It's easy. I can win this town. Let's play. So I
Awesome.
encourage you guys to do the same.
Thank you. And Nasreen, your final words.
The underestimation that you have felt, that you have experienced, it's fuel. Use it. It will guide you.
Thank you so much, Ryan.
I would say, and I know Nasreen's talked a bit about it, is the increased focus on intersectionalism. So many folks with disabilities are coming from other underrepresented groups or other backgrounds, and I think the more our conversations around inclusion focus less on this specific group and more on this specific person and everything they're bringing to the table as a character, as an actor, as a writer, as a filmmaker, the more we can bring disability to the forefront, because I think inherently folks with disabilities aren't just a person with a disability. They're a person with a disability who grew up in this place, who come from this background, who do this job. And the more we start talking about it as part of their whole person, I know I keep saying that, but I think the more we'll be able to bring it to the forefront, because if you're focusing just on a person with a disability, you're going to lose so much more of what you need to bring to the table.
Yeah, that's true. And Rod.
I echo all of this, honestly. I think what I would probably focus on is that intersectionality aspect, because I think Hollywood has a tendency to stereotype people and say, you can do this one thing, you can tell this one type of story, but we're so much more than just that. So why are we not hiring disabled actors to play a character that wasn't written disabled, but then could become disabled? And there are clearly people out there with these stories to be told, writers, directors, executives, everything, but they're not being given the opportunities. So they need to start being given those opportunities, having their voices be heard. And I think Kurt, you said this, of like, other minority groups, we need to come together. We need to be allies to one another. We need to help each other. And even if there are able-bodied executives out there, probably watching this, hopefully after this, just trust your creator. Give them the chance. If they are disabled and maybe you don't have that same identity, trust your creator, that they are bringing that level of authenticity to the story. Let them tell it.
I love that. Thank you. Can I get a A round of applause for this awesome panel. And I just want to close off and answer the question, is Hollywood afraid of disability? Yes. And so I want to close with, we're a resource to you, Real Abilities, all of the people on this panel, I am. And so don't be afraid to ask questions. I made an ableist statement up here. I think Esreen said she did. So we make, even though we're experts, we're human. We make mistakes. So it's not, the onus is not only on us, but we are here as a resource. We all need to educate and learn together. I want to thank Real Abilities for having this important conversation. I want to thank our sponsors that you see on the screen behind us. I want to thank our awesome interpreter, and I want to thank you, audience, for your time. I'm not sure if we're set up for questions. No, we're not. And so I just want to thank you so much. We're running at time. And I believe I'm just going to give this over to our announcer. Thank you so much.
The panelists applaud. Text, Real Abilities Film Festival Los Angeles. Panel discussion, Is Hollywood Afraid of Disability? October 22, 2022.